Nice criminal defense attorney Ryan Pacyga from ArrestedMN.com, and I want to tell you a little bit of a story about things that can matter or make a difference in a case, right? And some of this goes into the fees lawyers charge, or just some things to think about when you're hiring a lawyer, or even when a lawyer is representing you, right? And of course, lawyers can't do everything, and some of it depends on their schedules or whether they're in trial or things like that. But here are some things that some lawyers will try to do in cases, and some that will just maybe never try to do in cases. And you should watch out for the latter, of course. You want to have a lawyer who's going to try to do as many things as they can for you, which is reasonable under the representation. So let's talk about large-scale fraud cases, for example, right? In large-scale fraud cases, in federal court especially, they're often charged in conspiracies: conspiracy to commit wire fraud, conspiracy to commit mail fraud, conspiracy to commit money laundering, or things like that, right? There can be other frauds as well: healthcare fraud, medical aid fraud, things of those natures. But just in general, large scale criminal fraud cases, for example. In cases like that, what will happen is that oftentimes there are indictments from the federal government, and then the cases will go through and either go to trial, and either some people are found guilty and some aren't, or maybe all are found guilty, or maybe all are found not guilty. But if some of those people either plead guilty or they go to trial and they're found guilty, there will eventually be a sentencing hearing. And in federal cases, because of conspiracy, defendants are joined together. They're on trial together, or the cases are grouped together. Okay, and so one judge will eventually end up doing the sentencing in the cases if people plead guilty or are found guilty after a trial. And sometimes there are waves of these indictments where there are multiple people who are later on be indicted again on the same kind of case, but a different group of people. In these kinds of situations, either when someone's been sentenced but someone else hasn't been sentenced yet, or when there's multiple rounds of these cases going on, and this can happen in state court too, but it's more common in federal court. You know what can be really helpful? If your lawyer will go down to court and listen to the arguments at a sentencing hearing of another defendant, and then listen to what the judge says when they give their reasons for how they're sentencing someone. That gives a lot of perspective to your lawyer, all right, about how to handle your case going forward, either if it goes to trial or not, sometimes, or certainly if you plead guilty or are found guilty, what sentencing may be like, and more importantly, what it's like in terms of the judge's mind and how they see things. So let me give you an example. Last week, we've got a larger whole wave of federal fraud cases going through in Minnesota here. And I've got a few of those cases, and I went to see the sentencing of another defendant. Okay, that defendant had gone to trial and was found guilty. And I wasn't representing that person, and my client wasn't one of the 5 people or 7 people that went to trial there. But there are waves of these similar indictments, and other people are charged, and their cases are going to be coming up, right? Well, to be able to go to the court and not just look online where us lawyers have and have access to what the person got as a sentence, or even the written briefs, what the lawyers argued in writing about the sentence, but rather to be at the sentencing hearing, okay? That takes extra time for a lawyer to go do it, to watch it, to listen, to take notes, but it can be very informative, because you can hear some of the things that the lawyers are saying when they're arguing to the judge about what kind of sentence the person should get, sometimes even more than what they just wrote in their brief to the judge. You can see the judge. You can see how the judge reacts. Sometimes judges will, react with facial expressions or bodily expressions, right? Or they'll interrupt and they'll say something. None of these things are on the computers for the lawyers later about what does the judge say on them. We can order transcripts later, but those you're having to wait quite a bit of time. And of course, a transcript never even tells the whole story, not as much as seeing people and how they react to things. So I went and I watched, and I got an idea of how the judge was reacting to certain arguments that both the prosecution was making and the defense. And then the judge thought about the sentence, and then the judge imposed the sentence, and the judge articulated her reasons for giving the sentence very thoroughly. And that was very insightful to find out what was important to this judge, who's going to be a judge in some of the cases I have later for some clients. What was important to this judge about why she decided to give the sentence to that person that she gave? What arguments worked by the defense lawyers and which ones fell flat or didn't matter to the judge, perhaps, okay? What did the judge kind of call out as maybe a baloney argument, if you will, and what did the judge give some credit to? For example, in that case where I watched the sentencing, the judge had talked about that particular defendant, again, not my client, had done good things in his community before he got wrapped up in the fraud that he was in. And she recognized that, but she said in particular, and I'm going to paraphrase, that that defendant exploited very vulnerable people in a program that was designated to help people who really needed it, and that person kind of took advantage of that situation, right? So that was some of the reasons, and then the judge found the person not credible when he testified in trial, and that his apology really didn't mean much because it was so much different than how he had testified at trial. Those were essentially what that judge was saying in that scenario, okay? So it gave me some perspective on what's important to the judge when the judge calculates a sentence, what types of things the judge may punish more than others, some other things, what trial might look like if the person goes to trial, and the risk if a judge rejects somebody's testimony and doesn't believe it, whether they'll be punished even more for that, and some other things. So it gives you a better picture, right? And then in addition to that, I then took time to meet later with one of the lawyers for that person that was sentenced. And I had an opportunity to ask that lawyer questions about what his reactions were to that, what he thought resonated, what he thought didn't, and get some of his perspective on that as well. So the more your lawyer can gather information from people who may be similarly situated, the more that it can help us to counsel a client, in addition, even though every case is unique, but still to take some of that into account in counseling a client about their exposure or lack thereof, about whether to go to trial or not, to decide whether to plea or not. But then if they do decide, what kind of arguments are going to mean something to the judge, where the judge is going to lend an ear and really think that that might be a good argument to make to mitigate or lower your client's sentence, or what sort of things are just going to fall absolutely flat and kind of turn the judge off, if you will, right? And then similarly, what arguments was the government, meaning the prosecution, making that were going to be helpful, and that the judge lent a lot of credit to, and that meant a lot to the judge into calculating the sentence. And similarly, if there were any prosecution arguments that the judge thought weren't very powerful or meaningful, the judge sometimes will interrupt with questions to the lawyers in those situations, right? Again, so you don't know about these things unless you can go and attend these things. And again, lawyers can't be everywhere all the time, but it's one way that lawyers can kind of go out of their way to really sometimes make a big difference in a client's case, right? And so those are some things you can ask about or talk to your lawyer about if you're in that situation. I just like educating people about some things that can be done in circumstances, and ways that you can talk to your lawyer, or even just help you decide on what lawyer to hire. Is it a lawyer that's willing to do that for you, or is it a lawyer that doesn't do those things? So I hope that helps you. If you found it helpful, give me a like on there, subscribe to my channel. If you got more questions about criminal law or trials, my name is Ryan Pacyga. You can find me at arrestedmn.com or call me at 612-339-5844. The bison's my favorite animal, and I think that you, just like a bison, you were meant to roam free. It's my job to keep it that way. Have a great day.